I'd like to call the meeting to order this May 19th, 2025 of the Perrysburg School Board. Mr. Drew, if you would do roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Here.
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Ms. Minke. Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Here. I invite everyone to stand and we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We welcome everyone this evening to the Commodore, and it's always wonderful, especially at the end of the year, to see such a full room. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west side of the cafeteria. In case of emergency, an AED is located just outside these doors in the hallway. If emergency personnel is needed to be called, we are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. With our safety briefing, we will move to adopt the proposed agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bennington, Ms. Larimer, Mr. Drewer, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes, we have an agenda. First thing on our agenda is our recognitions for this evening, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Hostler.
All right, thank you. This is always an exciting time of year, not because we're in the final days of school, but there's certainly many things to celebrate and to recognize. So with that, we'll jump into the OMEA All-State Orchestra and Band. And we have Abby Miles, who's with us as she approaches the mic stand. Thanks, Abby. We recognize state qualifiers for athletics, but also you'll see on tonight's agenda all-state band, orchestra, and also rowing and other types of activities that have students achieve at such a high level. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ms. Miles.
Hello, good evening. Again, my name is Abby Miles. I am one of the high school orchestra directors at Perrysburg High School. And this evening, I will be recognizing both the All-State Band and All-State Orchestra students. I'll go ahead and call those students up and tell you a little bit about their accomplishments. So we have Vijay Gupta, Will Hollenbeck, Callista McPherson, Nithya Rajan, and Jacob Zhao. So the students you see before you here underwent a audition process in which they were auditioning against other students from various regions across the entire state. These students spent countless hours practicing and preparing their repertoire and the audition materials, and were selected to participate in the All-State Band and All-State Orchestra, and performed at the OMEA State Convention back in February of 2025. And at this event, this is one of the highest honors that you can get as a high school musician. So we're just very, very proud of these students and their accomplishment.
And also behind those students and their accomplishment are very accomplished teachers. So thank you and your colleagues for all that you do.
VJ, I'm wondering, is this VJ? I was wondering what VJ's instrument was. Oh, French horn. Oh, okay. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Just wondering.
So next is Perrysburg Junior High School State Science Day qualifiers. So we have a number of folks to recognize. And then 7th grade science teacher, as he makes his way up to the mic, Mr. Corbin Brangham will introduce his team.
Could I have my team up here with me? As you can see, we had a very successful Science Day this year. It's our largest group ever. This year, we had 9 students qualify for State Science Day, which is triple our previous record. In order to qualify, students needed to ask a scientific question and answer it using scientific methods. They needed to do full background research, keep records, like very detailed records of everything they did. They had a full report, it was about 10 pages or more, create a visual and oral presentation for judges, and then they needed to earn a superior at the Regional Science Day. This year, ours was held at Ohio Northern University, but next year we get to do University of Toledo, which is much closer. So they had to earn the superior to get to State Science Day. From there, students who earned a superior at State Science Day were invited to a celebration of science event at Ohio State University on May 10th, where they were able to showcase their projects and tour the science labs. We'll start at the end. So Pranav Polu, in his project, Disinfecting Water, he tested a method of disinfecting water using sunlight to see if it was still effective during the winter. Unfortunately, it wasn't, but that's good information to know. At regionals, he earned the SAVE Award, which stands for Science Alliance for Valuing the Environment, which is a local group. They're headquartered in Sylvania. He was also invited to share his research at the SAVE conference on May 13th. He earned an excellent at State Science Day. Next, we have Arya and Snigdha. Their teammate Gari was not able to make it today. In the project Effective Light Changes on Bioluminescence of Dinoflagellates, they studied how changing the day-night cycle affects the ability of bioluminescent algae to glow when disturbed at night. So if you ever seen those pictures of like the glowing ocean at the beach, they were studying those algae. They earned a rating of superior at State Science Day. Next up, we've got the team of Tirtha, Avnitha, and Manasvi. In their project titled Bananas, Sugar Levels from Raw to Ripe, they used a refractometer to measure the amount of sugar in bananas as they ripened. They earned the Seroptimist Award at regionals and a rating of superior at State Science Day. And then last, we have Olivia Boyce. In her project, What Food Will Benefit Ants the Most, Lettuce, Chicken, or Seeds, she studied the effect of ant diets on their ability to dig tunnels. Her project was named Best of Category in Animal Sciences at Regionals. She earned an excellent at State Science Day. And then also unable to join us today, Ishanu Varulu, who earned the NAMSA-sponsored award for Best Project, the award for Outstanding Accomplishment in Environmental Engineering, and the College Savings Award at Regionals, and a rating of excellent at State Science Day. He created a soil moisture sensor and used it to detect how different soil types held onto moisture. Go and give him a round of applause.
We had an opportunity to meet and hear a little bit more about this 2025 Service and Volunteerism Award. And I'll invite Annalisa Williams to come up and introduce the recipients and talk a little bit about the tremendous jobs that they've done, and welcome.
My name is Annalisa Williams. I do our college and career readiness for Perrysburg High School. I have 2 representatives for the Job Connections program. You know, as seniors, we graduated yesterday, so it's tough to get people. So first up is senior Jackson Kaczynski. And junior Colton Rumley. The proverb goes, give a man a fish and you will feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime. The Job Connections program began as a response to the growing need for schools to educate the whole child. The course focuses on building students' character, interpersonal skill sets, and resiliency through volunteering and giving back to the community. This vision supports the overarching district goal of all students reaching their greatest potential. As a district, we strive to help young people develop academically, emotionally, as well as socially, educating the whole child. Students within this program model the core values of a Perrysburg graduate: a thoughtful problem solver, purposeful communicator, respectful collaborator, persistent innovator, lifelong learner, and empathetic citizen in the Perrysburg community. This group of Job Connections students were nominated and won the 2025 Ohio Service and Volunteerism Award for the state of Ohio. Job Connections was just one of 2 youth organizations recognized at the awards ceremony in Columbus in March. These students have volunteered for over 150 hours of service, selflessly giving back to the Perrysburg community. The Serve Ohio program continues to inspire students through the guiding principle: we give, we learn, we serve, and we grow. Thank you so much to the Board of Education for supporting this program. Perrysburg Schools is one of the leading school districts in the state of Ohio for their innovative college and career readiness options. Thank you so much.
I know at the Perrysburg Heights Center, they were saying they didn't know what they were going to do without the students now gone. So they've really relied on all of the hours that they've put in there. So thank you. Appreciate it. I didn't know. Here's our, this will go in the high school. They're our state seal. This will go in the high school. Thank you so much.
Really?
Yes, thank you. Signed by Governor Lawrence.
That is so incredible. Well done, you guys. Thank you for doing that for us. Well done.
Thank you.
With all the different volunteer options that our students are able to utilize, we have pretty high expectations that we want outstanding individuals in the classroom, but also out in the community doing the kind of work that these students were just recognized for. When it comes to athletics, we know that we have high standards for our athletes, not only performing, but also being good citizens and good scholars. And our wrestling program has certainly achieved another level of success that not only their success on the mats, but also in the classroom and in the community. So with that, we'd like to introduce assistant coach Mark Evans to come up and talk a little bit about the outstanding program, the unprecedented success they've had, and introduce some of the young men. So take it away, Coach.
So I'm assistant coach Mark Evans. Coach Scott Burnett was unable to be here today, but we just have a couple things that we wanted to recognize. This year, our team finished third in the state, Division I. We scored the most points that we ever had. We had the most qualifiers in program history, and we also had the most placers as well. In the district tournament, we were the runner-ups. In the sectionals, we won sectionals. In the NLL, we won the NLL championships again. We had 8 individual placers, with Connor Bagadonis finishing 7th, Aiden Dodd finishing 4th, Gray Burnett winning a 2nd state championship, Alex Denkins finishing 2nd, Uriah Lopez finishing 3rd, Brody Bauman finishing 5th, Caden Soto finishing 3rd, Marcus Blaze winning his 4th state title, Cole Evans winning his 3rd state title, Josh Tackett's finishing 7th, Ben Sawaya and Eric Bush both qualifying. So.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then each wrestler was given a patch, a coin, and a pin. Those were all donated by custodian Robert at the high school, who's been a big supporter of Perrysburg wrestling.
That's cool. No wrestling, guys. That's cool. At least they're not Dundee.
Next up, I believe this might be the first time we've had national championship qualifiers in the program's history. And so very excited about that. And I'll invite Coach Ethan Peters up to talk a little bit about his program success.
Good evening. I'm Ethan Peters, 8th grade science teacher and head rowing coach for the high school rowing team. And I'm pleased to recognize the high school rowing team's varsity women's 4, who are Midwest regional finalists and are advancing to the Scholastic Rowing National Championship in New Jersey later this week. This boat consists of 5 graduated seniors: Catherine Cromley, Tatum Tackett, Ava Rantanen, Emma Branshaw, and Tori Grayson. These accomplished young women have made history for our team and school as the first women's varsity 4 we've ever advanced to the national championship, and our first medals at the Midwest Scholastic Championship since 2021. Accomplishing this is no small task. Our regional championship includes 50 teams from 12 different states and includes many teams that are many times larger than we are. There are no division or school size-based competitions in rowing. Teams of all sizes compete against each other. And this boat has put in millions of meters over the last 4 years. They've overcome obstacles and dealt with many challenges and learned from them, and have overcome them to accomplish an incredible feat just over a week ago. On day 1 of the Midwest Championship, they finished 3rd in time trials, where they raced against the clock, and advanced to finals on day 2, where they sprinted head-to-head against 7 other teams. After a slow start, they propelled themselves from 5th place to 2nd place in an exhilarating final 500 meters. The team, families, and coaches were screaming at the top of their lungs from shore as we witnessed one of the most exciting races we had ever seen. The race commentators could be heard making comments such as, "Perrysburg is really turning on the heat. Perrysburg is in 3rd, but they aren't satisfied. They're really pushing the next boat. And Perrysburg has a lot of grit." And anyone who knows and has worked with these athletes know that this describes them really well. This boat is the embodiment of grit, determination, and passion for the sport. We are so proud of them and all that they have accomplished, and are excited for them to represent us on the national stage. They've made our team, community, and Perrysburg schools proud. So congratulations to our women's varsity 4, and good luck to them at the Nationals Championship in New Jersey later this week. Thank you.
Thing to note, we always like to say this because it's still always true. We thank not only the coaches, but we also want to thank the parents, the guardians, the grandparents that made it possible. I'm going to I did notice that there is a brother and a sister that were here recognized today. I mean, that's just double the practices, double the time. We know that getting everybody to all the places is a big commitment. And so we know behind each one of these athletes is at least one adult driving them around and getting them to the right place at the right time. So thank you to everyone who supports the students in all their endeavors.
So next is the Shining Star Award. So this is a very prestigious award given out to a well-deserving staff member that makes a difference in students' lives here in Perrysburg, and also is a great role model, somebody that uplifts their peers as well. So we've talked about some of the great accomplishments that our students certainly have achieved, but now is a moment to recognize a staff member who has been recognized and identified by their peers for having those same kind of qualities that we've come to expect in all that we do here at Perrysburg. So with that, I'll introduce Mr. Scott Bucher, principal at Perrysburg Junior High, to talk about the Shining Star Award recipient, Mrs. Andrea Monheim.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hostler and the Board of Education, for allowing me to present Andrea Monheim the Shining Star for the second semester. So Andrea, come on up. So in the board agenda, I know you pasted all the nominations that Andrea received, which was quite a few. And so my task was to kind of condense them all into a little spiel here with you. But I've known Andrea for years. Quite literally, she was my 7th grade health teacher too. So I always like to throw that out there a little bit. But also too, I was an assistant coach for her when she was the head girls track coach at the high school for many years before I came over to the junior high in the current role. So to give you some summary on everything that Andrea does, first and foremost, above anything else, she is an incredible leader of people. And she serves as one of our counselors at the junior high, which in the junior high age, obviously being a school counselor is so important to have to support our kids and support our staff. And she is one of the best I've ever been around. And I think if you would talk to anybody in the school district who's worked with Andrea from a counseling perspective, everybody would have the same comments towards her professionalism with that. 2 years ago, she decided, for some unknown reason, that she wanted to add more to her plate. And she is also our junior high athletic director. So when she stepped aside from coaching track at the high school, she approached me through that process. And one of the concerns I had initially was, how can you go from counseling hat to AD hat? And she has done that seamlessly, and it's been actually a better transition than I ever could have imagined. So her support to our athletic department has been absolutely just fantastic. She's one of our web coordinators. So the list is going to go on and on. So if you might need to get some water here. So she does a lot for us. So web coordinator, she got training through the Boomerang Project, which is a nationally accredited program. Stands for where everyone belongs. And she coordinates along with a team of teachers, and then Mr. Decker as well, our orientation program for our 7th graders, and a mentorship program for all of our students that way. With that. In addition, a BLT member, a crisis team facilitator. She does small groups with students in the junior high, focusing on different things, which I'll touch a little bit later. And in the past, she also was a cheerleading coach at the junior high, I believe a cross country coach, and in 2016 was the district track coach of the year. As you go through those nominations, you'll see some consistent themes on Andrea. And among those are just the positivity and energy that she has every single day that she comes into the junior high. Andrea never has a bad day. She always has the same smile on her face you see up here every single day with that, and that makes her a natural person that our students just flock to on a daily basis, and our staff members. She's a comforting person. When we have many students, like I said, junior high, very tough time. Andrea is the go-to person to many of our students there. She has the empathetic ear, and then also to kind of putting that AD hat on a little bit. She also holds our students to high expectations and high standards with that. And that is such a hard balance line to find, being empathetic, but also having those high expectations and high standards for our kids with this. What's amazing is if you see Andrea in the hallway, It seems like she knows all 830 kids. She seems to know all their siblings, all their parents, all their hobbies, all their athletic accomplishments, all their extracurricular accomplishments. And she always says something to all the students in the hallway whenever she sees one of her students going. It simply is amazing with that. Her small groups that she organizes focuses on stress, organization, grief, study skills, and friendships. And it's been a safe place for all of our students at the junior high to have that extra support when needed. But what also too is very special, or I kind of made my note here, the impromptu moments. And I know, Stacy Bunker, who's here, one of our school psychs, commented to me how often that students come during lunchtimes simply to eat with Mrs. Monheim because they needed a moment, and she's giving up her lunch to eat with those children to make sure that they feel comforted and supported in our school here too. So from a staff impact too, like I told you, it's going to go on and on and on with Andrea here. So for staff impact, her voice and input means a lot to the entire staff. She has done several professional developments leading our staff, and it's always a pleasure to have Andrea with her story that she shares. And she's never lost sight of that teaching perspective, with her colleagues, with that. She has not afraid to have hard conversations with our staff members when it comes to individual student needs, but always comes in a way of collaboration and being able to show the different points of view and to be able to switch on the different lens with our staff, with our kids. Much like for our students, very empathetic yet honest in helping our staff. Some final thoughts about Andrea, and I pulled out some quotes from the different nominations in here. One nomination said that Andrea is strong, supportive relationships with everyone who's part of our Perrysburg Schools community. She approaches everything with enthusiasm and a smile on her face. She puts her whole heart into work and helps others feel seen and supported. And I think my favorite one through those nominations was she's a true light in our community. And I couldn't say it better. There's no one more deserving for this than Andrea Monheim. Thank you. For another nominator, you come on up for the picture.
False start. Ms. Monheim, thank you for everything that you do for our district. I still remember my son being in track trying to figure out how you guys managed like half of the junior high at one time. So.
We have wonderful coaches.
Yeah. We will move into our 5-minute break, which gives those of you who don't want to stick around for the rest of the meeting a graceful way to leave. We would also move into the public comment if there are any after this. But it's 6:14 right now, so we'll go for 5 minutes. At 6:19, we'll resume the meeting. 19, we're back into the board meeting. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Juror for his presentations.
All right, well, thank you. Good evening. Got two presentations tonight. We separated the financial, the monthly financial review from the 5-year forecast. And I do want to kind of, all three of these though, both of these will feed into the presentation Tom and I have after this section. So it is all connected, but we'll try to be brief, but give you the information that you need moving forward. So the general fund update, we are 83% through the year. So, surprises hopefully are over, and we cruise financially through the next 2 months. And we're tracking our cash balance just like we do year after year. And as we'll talk about, though, the only surprise here is that we're doing better than what I'd expected a year ago or even as early as November, but we'll talk about that later. And again, you can see the light green is our cash balance, the dark green is our expenditures. Expenditures are relatively flat month to month, and obviously our cash balance fluctuates based on our revenue stream. So let me start by, we're at 173 true cash days, which is outstanding. From a finance standpoint, this is where I like to be all the time, which is though it's not really practical. Our revenues year over year is down 3.6%. Again, not surprising based on obviously the levy rejection in November, but we've made up some of it up elsewhere, and our expenses are up 7.6%. One of the big changes here is Tom's computer never likes that's not a change, doesn't like my presentations, but why he's pulling that up. So I do this every year in May when I update the May forecast based on our actual spending trend. I could do that almost every month through the year, but I can wait till May. I'm have a fairly high level of confidence what the next 2 months are going to be like, and so the financials in here reflect what's I'm going to present in the forecast. All right, so just so you know, so these, if you go back to compare this to March, they're not going to match because it's been updated based on our spending and revenue trends. And of course, like on the revenue, you see all these 100% because we don't expect in those areas to receive any more revenue. But I don't have it circled here, but the good news is last year at this time, I thought that in fiscal year 25, we would deficit spend $3.2 million, and we should deficit spend less than $400,000. And that's I don't want to call it, it's not accidental, right? The things that have happened, and mainly the staff changes where we've not filled positions and we've absorbed that pain, right? The things like not having a custodian, so eliminating building use. So it's great from a financial standpoint, but there's been pain inflicted elsewhere as we've been prudent not filling positions going into the reduction year next school year. So I want to make a couple of comments. We're on trend on everything, but one thing, and this is just for transparency on accounting standpoint, this year I'm going to be doing something different. We get about May, June, we'll get a reimbursement called threshold costs for high cost special education dollars, but it's for last year. They're always a year behind. And you have an opportunity, as a treasurer, I can post that in a couple of different ways. I can post it as a restricted funds, or I can post it as a reimbursement of previous year's expenditure. And for visibility standpoint, going forward, I plan to post that as a reimbursement of a previous year expenditure. So that line, you'll see it, the restricted state aid drops because of that, but you'll see every year a refund of previous year expense. That will be threshold costs. I think it makes it a little more transparent, a little bit cleaner, from an accounting standpoint. And we don't always have refunds of previous year's expenses. The last couple of years we have. The ESC, we've had a refund where we've been overbilled because we kind of, with them, we pay based on anticipated services. And sometimes, for example, maybe we have one less para or something happens and we get reimbursed. And then sometimes workers' comp refunds fall into that. So that's just an accounting change. So, the percentages are going to be off year over year, but next year it'll be consistent. So any questions on that? I don't want people to feel like we're, in the accounting world, a lot of times there's more than one way to do it right. I'm trying to do it right that makes the most sense. And then on the expense side, we're on trend. We're 83% through the year, and you can see, we're pretty much on those numbers as expected. Of course, we're always okay coming in below 100%, but obviously from a forecast standpoint, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. So not much, pretty boring. We're on trend. And now so any questions on that? I want to spend just a couple minutes. I put these reports in board docs. The Auditor of State has initiated a new program called Financial Health Indicators. They've had this program in place for municipalities, but not for schools. So it's being rolled out for schools. And what essentially they do is take your audited financial statements, run these ratios. Those who have been through finance and graduate school, these are standard ratios. There's really nothing, it's just numbers. It's plug and chug, and if the ratios aren't within a certain range. And the whole idea with this is to help identify districts who are heading towards trouble before they get in trouble. All right. There are 17 total indicators. Almost all public schools, 15 apply, and many of us, 16 indicators apply. And it's red, green, yellow. Keep it simple for us folks. And of course, the intents for early warning for future fiscal issues. These reports are up at the Auditor State's office website. You can look at it from any school district along with our audited financials. But make it easy, I've attached them to board docs. So there's two reports for FY23 and 24. So just quickly, in FY23 we had 13 green, 2 yellow, and 1 red. The one yellow was cautionary due to a drop in unrestricted assets. So anytime, and mostly cash, right? If our cash balance, which it will be less than it was last year, we'll get a caution on it. All they're doing is look, it went down. It's not whether it's good or bad, it went down, so you get a caution. And we have one cautionary and one critical indicators do an asset to liability ratio. Oops. What that means is in Eric's world, it's more important on your balance sheet, right? You have assets, which includes your physical assets and all your liabilities. It doesn't quite apply in our world because we don't really care about, well, we care, but we don't depreciate for tax reasons, but we depreciate for real reasons. So our buildings essentially are depreciated, right? So we have all these buildings, but there's not a lot of, they're not, the value on them in the books is not that high. The other thing that's changed, as I page forward in here, which I didn't put up here, is that a couple of years ago, the state said, look, you guys all participate in STRS and SCRS. That is a liability to the school district, even though you're one of many who participate in that. So within our liabilities, we have our retirement liability, our portion of state retirement. So it's there. It's not in theory. If STRS or SCRS went bankrupt, the obligations to the employees, the school districts would have to make up. I don't know how you do that, but that's in theory. Last year, so 24, we had 14 green indicators, and the same asset to liability ratios, and that'll be there for forever. This is good. You know, they're not looking for 1 or 2 yellows. It's got to be significant changes before they start throwing the red flag at us. And just so you know, state budget stuff's going on. We're not going to talk about it tonight, but I will give a kind of a preamble that chances are the 5-year forecast will get updated because of state budget. Okay, There's a good chance at this point we don't know what's going to happen. My crystal ball has gotten very, very murky. Any questions on that, on the financial reports at this point? Okay, so we're in good shape. We're ending the year strong, and that strength has come on the back primarily of, really not filling staff positions, as well as some other savings that we've had, like LED lighting, propane buses, that kind of stuff, which we'll talk about. So with that, I'm going to run into the 5-year forecast. This is like a record break, just a little pause. So the 5-year forecast, we went through it in detail at the work session, so I'm not going to go through it line by line. You're welcome, Sue. But I just want to remind the board, semi-annually, May and November, we do the 5-year forecast, and the main purpose of that is engage this conversation about long-term planning and financial discussions. The 5-year forecast is also our basis for being able to sign contracts. It's that, if we don't have money, as the forecast says, we can't sign a contract because we can't meet the contract's obligations. And then the Department of Education and Workforce and the state auditor use the 5-year forecast to determine districts at risk. And they're getting much more aggressive about this because of the number of districts got in trouble. So if you look like you're going that way, chances are you're going to get a letter saying, hey, you look like you're going the wrong way. What's your plan? But a couple of notes. This is a forecast of today. Like I said, the state budget is the big thing that's sitting out there that could change that. And there could be other things that impact it, but it's based on a particular set of assumptions, which we've talked about already. I'll talk about some new ones here, not new ones, but adjustments since. And there are tons and tons of places out there you can go if you really want to go down a rabbit hole with this stuff. So this is just a little reminder, because the question I keep getting is the forecast doesn't show really like the levy falling off as well as the cuts. The problem it does, but you got to pick the right benchmark, right? So my benchmark, if you will, is May at this time. And so if you look at this chart shows the forecasted revenue each of the fiscal years based on when that forecast was made. As you can see, last May we expected a little bit higher revenue. We were forecasting that the levy would have passed, right? And it didn't. So we see a reduction in there. And if you look at the important here, the expense side, this is where what we've happened this year in terms of not filling positions and the reductions show up. So if you will, last year at this time, I was forecasting our expenses in FY26, or the coming school year, to be $85 million or so. And right now, we're a little over $77 million. That's $8 million. That's the difference. That's at $6 million plus what we've saved this year. So we're actually over $6 million in terms of year-to-year savings. And that folds into our levy conversation here in just a little bit. So since the work session, I've updated the FY25 based on actual trends, and we've updated other things based on retirements. The change in STRS, we have retirements coming every day. Mr. Chrissy does a great job working with me. What do we think? We got a teacher retiring at this salary, where they're replaced by a teacher at this salary, and those are up-to-date savings that's captured. So we've captured all those retirement savings too, and it's very significant if you think about it. A teacher who's at the end of their career versus one who's early in their career, that difference is very significant. And here's the biggest change in this from May 7th is, and I was probably overly optimistic on May 7th and did not put anything in the forecast about property tax reform. There is going to be property tax reform. We just don't know what it is. So what I said, the best one we know in terms of the numbers, in terms of the calculation, is Senate Bill 66. Senate Bill 66 essentially takes all of our levies, all of our operating levies, doesn't include the bond levies, includes inside millage, includes our income tax, puts it all in there and say, okay, that's your new base. Like for us, it's like 35 mils. Not 20 anymore, the floor, it's 35. So as property values go up, that effect is going to keep dropping until it hits 20 again, which it will never hit 20 again because our income tax won't let it. You know, we're trying to get the income tax portion taken out of that, not included in there. But Senate Bill 66 has the biggest impact on us directly, and it impacts us actually out in the outer 2 years, 28 and 29. And so this is our new basis for a levy conversation. We'll use November for a benchmark, because coming off that levy, but from a revenue and expense side, this is where we're going to start. So a couple weeks ago, this is what I shared with you, that we would, our cash balance without a new levy, we would be obviously $22 million negative in fiscal year 29, which obviously can't happen. Legally, that can't happen, right? But it did show that this year, next year, strong cash balance, 27, not so good. And the revised forecast, the first 3 years are about the same. The difference you see is the last 2 years. That's the impact of House Senate Bill 66. We'll see the impact of Senate Bill 66 in the last 2 years. And you're going, well, Randy, why? And it's because next year, in calendar year 26, is an update year for property valuations. And I've got forecasted a 12% increase in property values. Now, and Auditor Ostreit thinks that's probably a little bit conservative, but if Senate Bill 66 goes through, it's not going to help, it's not going to impact. The effective rates, millage rates will all drop for the schools. Won't necessarily drop for anyone else, but it'll drop for the schools. So 30 to 35% of property taxes are school taxes. They're subject to the effective rate, and they would be essentially go down. That's the biggest change. So again, you saw this. We're not out of the woods yet. Looking better, feeling better about things. Obviously, the permanent improvement levy passing is big, and finishing the year strong, I think, shows our commitment to live within our budgets. And now, the question is, what's the next step? And here's the final thing I want to say on here: true cash days. I'm going to try to. We got to look at the numbers, but most of us can't relate to $25 million. But we can relate to having 120 days of money in the bank to pay our bills. And 25 million means that's 120 days for us. And this assumes no restoration of staff or programs that were eliminated through reductions. And if nothing's changed, we would, next year, at some point in time, we'd get a letter from the Auditor of State that says you're in fiscal watch. What's your plan? Now, with the revised forecast, well, no, let me back up. So going back to what I said, we use November as our benchmark. Coming out of the levy rejection, I said, look, we had to pick a number for a levy renewal, and I picked 14 million at that time because that would get us to the next 5 years. So just as a benchmark, I've used 14 million in my forecast here. Now, this really doesn't carry any weight. What's important is the line above it. But this, again, please note, I'm using this as a benchmark, not as a recommendation at this point. And if, with this forecast and 14 million new levy in November, we'd end this period at true cash days of 84. Not horrible. I mean, actually good, but not, I don't think, overkill by any means, but that's in the eye of the beholder, right? At 131 days, you're going, that's pretty significant, but you drop fairly quickly. And again, there's no restoration of programs or staff that we eliminated for fiscal year 26, and we're still deficit spending, in the final year of the forecast. So right now, we're just waiting the state budget and property tax legislation. And so really the next steps is whatever state comes and then whatever the board's decision and what to do in November. So that's, right now, you know, a little bit the dog is waiting for the tail to wag, and we'll see what goes from there, and then, you know, whatever we have control of here. Any questions on that? Anyone, you know, and we probably don't remember all the assumptions, but hopefully we'll hit the high points here. Questions?
Any
comments?
questions?
We okay? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drewer. We have 6.4 agenda items 6.2 to 6.3 for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bennington, I'll go with Ms. Menke for the second. Any other discussion questions? So we're approving both the financial report as well as the 5-year forecast.
Again, probably with the understanding that we'll be reapproving a 5-year forecast once we get visibility into the implications from the state budget.
All right, Mr. Drewer, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Minke.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer. Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. 6.5 Finance Committee minutes. Mr. Bennington, Ms. Menke, any additional comments or discussion?
No, nice summary of the minutes are in here, of the discussion. I'll just point out, you know, we had a kind of I don't even know if I call it preliminary, just a general discussion about the levy in anticipation of the conversation I assume we're about to have now. So some of this was practiced on with the Finance Committee, I guess is what I'm saying.
Guinea pigs. All right, well then we'll move into what Mr. Bennington nicely segued us into. Number 7, we'll turn it over to Mr. Hostler and Mr. Drewer for beginning conversation about the operating levy or some kind of version of the future for the district. Mr. Hostler.
Yep, well, thank you. Both Randy and I will kind of take turns walking through some of the information that we're presenting to you this evening. So why is a discussion needed? And certainly we point back to a levy rejection in November. And so that is really what is driving us. And with that levy rejection, this is kind of an overview of what we experienced. It's a loss of 17% of our annual budget. That's about $13.5 million a year. And as of January 1 of 2025, 9.7 mils, which generated those dollars, was rolled off of individuals' taxes here in Perrysburg. So that left a pretty large, gap in our budget, a pretty big hole. And so we set about how do we fill that. It's been widely covered in the media in terms of what that plan is, what it does. Certainly at the board meetings, we've spent a lot of time really before the levy was on the ballot, going through what would we do in the event that the levy is rejected. And that is something that we worked through and shared that with the board. So those factors are leading us to where we are today, because as Randy's cartoon with the 5-year forecast, we're really not out of the woods yet. So this is really engaging with what do we need to do to get out of the woods. And that's what this conversation is about. So taking cues from Randy with the going back to the November 5-year forecast, he highlighted this is the whole 5-year forecast document. So we kind of pulled out a portion of this, and that shows that without a levy, any new money, we would be running out very quickly. So we would have less than $400,000 cash on hand to pay bills. That would be the end of fiscal year 27. And so things looked obviously like we're in the middle of the woods. We're just starting to head into the woods. So you can see here that one of the things that Randy alluded to earlier, and you can see it here on the November 5-year forecast, is that he plugged in a $14 million number to kind of guide us as to what it would look like with new money. So why 14 million? If you recall, in November, we had $13.5 million that was on the books and being collected. We asked for an incremental levy that would go up a little bit each year, and that $14 million put us back to where we would be had the levy been a straight renewal. What's important about that is that includes the $6 million worth of reductions. And going back to June of 2024, when the board sat down and said, what are our options? One of the options was to renew that levy, but we would be asking voters to renew a levy and cutting over $6 million from the budget at the same time. And the board felt that wasn't a good ask to the community. So that is where we were in November and moving forward. With that projection back in November, with the $14 million a year, it would lead us to 50 days true day cash at the end of the 5-year forecast. So the board policy recommends 60-day true days cash, and for people that are at home, you should set aside so much money in the event that there's an emergency. There's different theories as to how much you should set aside. And so the board has said, we want 2 months worth of expenditures set aside. And so we would be below that with the $14 million. So
I was saying, that's a good point. That's why we're looking at true cash days, because $14 million is a lot of money. It's 2 months, right? So just trying to keep that something that all of us can relate to. You know, I may not need $14 million to get through 2 months. Well, my wife's Amazon purchasing, maybe. But the point is, think about your home life, what you'd be comfortable with.
So since November, we've obviously taken a lot of steps to try to stop the bleeding. The patient's on the table. We want to stop the bleeding. And so we've done that. So there's been some significant factors that have led to our current financial conditions, and we just want to echo those because I know Randy talked about those. But the state teachers' retirement system changed their eligibility from 33 years to 32 years. Each year, we budget for a certain number of retirements. With this change, and tonight, later on in the agenda, you'll see a number of retirements that came because of this, that weren't part of the budget anticipated. So that is a benefit when you're replacing somebody at the top of the salary schedule with someone at the bottom of the salary schedule. So that is a benefit. So we experienced significant benefits with that. If you can not fill that position, and there's some cases where that's happened, that's even a better benefit to the bottom line, not necessarily to the service of what we do, but to the bottom line. So elementary redistricting was also a net savings for the district. We had a number of custodial positions and other positions, for example, where we were going to make those reductions next school year, and individuals saw that happening and decided to leave or to retire. And we were unable to attract people to replace them, because who wants to leave a position to take a job that will be eliminated in 4 months? So we had a number of positions that went unfilled. We reduced how we're using substitutes in many categories, so that was important as well. And with our inability to fill those positions, we had to move the timeline to restrict after-school activities to right now versus next fall. And that reduced overtime. So there's these kind of cascading things. When we have more propane buses, those are a cost savings. The LED lighting, the use of substitutes, not a very popular program, but we have now requirements as to how many copies individuals can make in the district. All of those things lead to a savings in real time. And so investments are outperforming what we forecasted, and then additional reduction through contracted services with the ESC. So if we can keep a student here instead of sending them out for services, And we've really worked hard to try to do that where possible. So that results in some changes that Randy talked about. So instead of a $3 million deficit at the end of this year, we're looking at just about a $400,000 deficit. So with the 5-year forecast that the board just discussed and approved, it's important to note that with this, we are deficit spending in each of the years of the 5-year forecast. So this year it's 400,000. We're wrapping up this year. Next year, it's 6 million. The following year, it's 9.3. It's 16.5, and then 20.3 million in the last year. So those are our fiscal cliffs that are lining up that require us to take action. And the two actions that we have available are to make reductions to offset each of those deficits. So in very straight terms, it is cutting $6 million next year. It is cutting $9 million to avoid the deficits. We do have a cash reserve or cash balance. That's kind of the checking account balance. And you can see that at the bottom, and you can see it dwindle to where it is, minus $6.4 million in fiscal year 2028. So if we don't change anything and we continue to operate as we are, we will be hitting the rocks in fiscal year 2028. So I think that's important. If we look at the future, if we're not on the ballot or if we have a ballot issue that's rejected this year, depending on the size of that, we would need to make about $2.5 million of reductions for the next school year. So this would certainly be something that we will talk about. And so delaying a levy requires us to go to the voters when we do go to the voters asking for a higher amount. And if a levy is not supported or rejected, then the amount we need to cut will increase as well. So taking prudent action now will help in the years to come, and we'll kind of break that down for the board. So kind of focusing on this, with the $14 million operational levy that was plugged into the 5-year forecast, that ends up with 84 true days cash. That's what that looks like, and so that's important. So we wanted to also explore, and we talked about this at the Finance Committee, and I appreciate the committee members leading the conversation. And they said, okay, well that really becomes where we were in November, the $14 million mark. That doesn't restore any of the things that were reduced, so those things aren't coming back. Those funds aren't coming back. And so we began to look at, well, what would happen if we were to do some other things now because of the reductions that we've made throughout the year? And because we're in a little bit better position today because of all those reductions that we identified that's happened between November and May. And that impacts us every single year, the 5-year forecast. So we plugged in, well, what would happen if we had $11 million annual operating levy? So not the 14 million, but now 11 million. And so we plug those numbers in, and you can see at the end of the 5-year forecast, we're left with 44 days, true days cash. So it puts us under that 60 days. So if you set aside 2 months of operational funds at your home, this puts us a little bit below that. But it certainly is something that, given where we are and the ability to make reductions and fine-tune the budget between now and then, it feels like something that is very doable for us to do that. So during the Finance Committee, there was a couple different options that were explored, and they're represented on this chart. The $14 million we've covered, that is about 9.98 mils. And the question that we asked is, when would we be back on the ballot? So if this were a 5-year levy, we would get through all 5 years without needing to be on the ballot. So that levy will expire in 5 years, and we'll be going to the voters and asking them to approve a levy or letting it expire. The $11 million levy, we also looked at, would we need to go to the voters before that, according to the 5-year forecast, and the answer is no. That is a 7.8 mil levy.
There's less room for error, though, with that one.
Right.
Right, so if you, I'm not saying what you should do or shouldn't do. 14 is comfortable. As Mr. Hostler said, 11 is doable, but just know we start getting out fiscal year 28, 29, the board's not going to have as much flexibility, but again, you're doing a smaller ask up front now. And of course, things could change, who knows? You know, maybe someone will get, anyway, I'm going to editorialize it, we don't want to go there.
So May, also, we were asked to look at, you know, an $8 million levy, and that would be 5.75 mils. And when would we be back on the ballot? And that would be 2028, 3 years in, or we would have to make reductions before this levy would expire. So we would ask voters to approve a levy that brings in $8 million annually, and we would either need to make cuts in 3 years, or we would need to go back to the voters before this levy expires. And so that would set up a situation where we're either making cuts mid-year, or I'm sorry, in the middle of the 5 years, or we're asking voters to approve another levy to get us through, and then 2 years later we're coming back and asking voters to renew or add on to this levy. And so the other conversation that took place was an income tax. So if we were to put an income tax, a 0.5% income tax on, that's the equivalent of about 7.48 mils, and just we would get to 2028. That average would be about 7.72 million a year on average, because the way that the income tax builds over time, it's a longer runway, the way that it's collected, and we would be back on the ballot in 2028.
Yeah, fully collected, that's 10.5 million, so it's close to the 11 million, but it takes so long to collect it. It takes almost 2 full years before you get full collection on an income tax, and so that's why it has some good long-term impacts, but in the short term it takes longer to collect.
Yeah.
And we have that modeled if we need to look at it at some point in time.
So decision guide, all of these do not restore any of the $6 million in cuts made for this upcoming school year. So that's important. Those $6 million are not part of, you know, any of these calculations and adding those back. Again, coming back to the analogy that doesn't work very well, but the patient is on the table. We want to stabilize the patient. We want to keep it from bleeding out. We're not, you know, putting more blood into the patient at this point in time. We're just stopping. So we want to do a deeper dive into the 7.8 mil levy. That raises $11 million a year annually for your consideration. Based on the board members' discussion at finance, that is the kind of the direction that we were given, you know, by the board. So we want to be very transparent. So what we're talking about with this levy, an operational levy on November 4th, would be a new levy. It would be a tax increase. So I just want to be very clear on what we're talking about here. So levy was rejected, those mills went away, that is gone. So anything we're asking for moving forward is a new levy, and it will increase people's taxes. So as we start to talk about these different scenarios, we want to put that out there so that people understand what we're talking about. So what does this mean for homeowners? And again, being very transparent about this. So the 7.8 mils per $100,000 of value is $273 annually, or $22.75 a month. So that's what we're talking about in terms of what impact will this have on you. So we do want to, because people are going to make these comparisons, so we wanted to take a step and make these comparisons between where things were left off on December 31st, 2024, when those mills were about to be erased, and what this levy would bring forward. So voters rejected the levy that was on the ballot, and that eliminated 9.7 mills, resulting in that loss of funding, and we've not collected any of those funds. That millage is gone, but it was 9.7 mills. That's what people were paying in 2024, and that has gone away. So now, through the conversations that we've gotten leading up to this presentation, one of the options that the board will be discussing is the 7.8 mil levy, which is smaller than what folks were collecting back, or paying back in 2024. So we heard loud and clear that the tax burden was a concern with the property values rising the way that they have. And we think that this is a responsible step to stop the bleeding of the schools and give us that sustainability, give us that predictability that we don't have right now. And we'll talk about the impact that that's having on us. And again, this will not restore the $6 million that was cut. So just to be clear on that. So a little bit of comparison, because we know folks will want to know this information. So when in 2024, individuals were paying 9.7 mils, and that's the levy that expired when the the ballot issue was rejected in November. So that was $339.50 per $100,000 of home value. Again, 7.8 mils, what we're discussing right now, is $273 annually per 100,000. So again, it is $66.50 less per year, $5.54 less than what folks were paying in 2024. So I think that's important. Taking it the next step, we also talked significantly during the campaign in November about the high school bond issue. That will be paid off. So beginning in January 1st on 2026, if this levy is successful and it goes on the books, it'll be going on the books the same time folks are done paying for the high school bond issue. So that's 1.7 mils right now. So again, it's lining up very well, so that 7.8 mils will feel even less than that because of the total tax bill will be reduced by that 1.7 mils. So how does that really, what's the real feel of that? Instead of $273, it would be $213.50 per $100,000 when you factor in those two things, one going off, one coming on, and that's $17.79 per month. So again, different ways that you can look at this, but at the end of the day, it is back in 2024, folks were paying 1.7 mils, actually a little bit more, and then 9.7 mils. And you can see where we are from 2024. But again, the reason we're spending time on this is to make sure people understand, because this is a new tax. And it is something that we want to remind folks of where they were, and if we're successful in November at the ballot with this particular issue, where we could be. So it's 3.6 fewer mills that will be collected than 2024, and you can kind of see the benefits there, where where we stand with this. We've talked about this theme of not being out of the woods, and if the board were to say, we're not going to be on the ballot because of that accumulating, compounding deficits, we would want to make reductions going into that next school year to slow that down, because that cliff will be pretty steep. And if we don't do that, the next ask will be higher. So that would be something that we'll be communicating and working on if the board were to go in this direction.
We don't have it here, but just the equivalent, so the $11 million is kind of, again, it's our benchmark. I mean, obviously the board hasn't, we're not saying that's the answer. It's just kind of as a starting point. But the equivalent ask, if you wait a year, if you say, look, we're in a good cash position, let's wait a year, November of 26, the equivalent ask is 15.5 million. Okay, just waiting a year, and that gets to the same point, the same true days in 29. We're comparing apples and apples in terms of cash balance in that last fiscal year. So that's, so you ask, oh, you're good, but we do a smaller ask, and then of course the risk is higher the longer you wait because of that financial cliff, and as Mr. Hostler pointed out, it's like making a reduction in fiscal year 27, just making small, well, say 2.5 million is not small, but make a relatively smaller reduction. That way, if something negative happens, we're not making astronomical reduction in the following year. So take, just like a little bit of savings today means more than savings tomorrow. A little bit more revenue today means more than revenue tomorrow.
So I think that uncertainty that is really hanging over our heads right now is something that I know certainly the board feels. I know it certainly our staff feels, and I think our community is beginning to feel that uncertainty, the weight of that. And I wanted to share a couple things because this uncertainty is impacting the classroom. We know the programs and the staff that have been cut certainly impacts the student experience. But I think this is something that we wanted to share with you. So we had a teacher candidate decline a job offer from Perrysburg, and instead they accepted and will commute to a high school in Sandusky County.
Much lower performing high school.
And so that's something that that doesn't happen to Perrysburg, frankly. We had an English teaching position. We received 5 applicants, and we are interviewing this week for that. 5 applicants for a high school English position. Last year for this same position, we had 22 applicants. And going back to 2021, we had 31 applicants. We have a foreign language position that is split between the junior high and the high school. We have 2 applicants, and 1 candidate is currently licensed of the 2. We had science teacher position. We received 5 applicants and only 1 that holds a license for the area that they would be teaching in the fall. In 2022, we had 19 applicants for a science position. And we had 3 teachers that were laid off. And we were able to recall them due to the retirements, and all turned us down because they had found jobs in other districts, and because of that uncertainty did not want to come back because we're not out of the woods. So I think when you begin to think about that, that is impacting our ability, and we kind of say it here, it's impacted our ability to recruit applicants. Consider that 3 high school positions were just highlighted, and total applicants for those 3 high school positions were 12. To fill a vacant board seat, we had 22 people submit applications, to give it perspective. So people are watching, candidates are watching what's happening, and they're looking at their futures and where do they want to spend their time. And this uncertainty is a cloud that is hanging over where we are today as a district, and that will impact a student experience here in Perrysburg. Our teachers continue to do great things. There's no doubt about it, and we celebrated some of the great things that are happening in our district, and behind every one of those activities, there was a teacher standing alongside those students. And that's the kind of quality staff that we've been able to attract. And if you're in a smaller district, and we've done very, very well over the years with people that start out somewhere and then they want to come to Perrysburg, but those folks are not willing to leave their districts to come here and be first on the cut list. And that is impacting what we do. So again, we've heard about all the different programs and things, but this is a concrete example. And is that the kind of district we have had? No. And so the future is getting larger and larger in the windshield. Timelines, we were asked to provide this information. And if we want to be on the ballot on November 4th, August 6th is the Board of Elections filing deadline. So that too is getting much closer in the windshield as we travel down this road together. Also very important is we want to continue to have the dialogue beyond this board meeting. And so Thursday, June 5th at 10 a.m. and at 6 p.m. here in this room in the Commodore, any residents that would like to come and talk about what we're discussing here can do so, and we will work out the details in terms of board members being present, but we want to continue the conversation. Community engagement has been a huge theme in the last year, and that continues. And so we'd be remiss in not presenting this information and not having an invitation for folks to continue the dialogue with us, because it is important. It's important to our students. It's important to our community. And, so we'll stop there and turn it over for any questions that we can answer. And
Any, I guess, first content questions, and then we'll move into discussion. All crystal clear? Okay. I mean, I'd be interested to hear if there was additional conversation during the Finance Committee meeting that would be valuable as we dive into this.
Yeah, I don't want to take you down, my whole thought process that is continuing to evolve and retrench and evolve again. And I've certainly been at the can we ask for what we lost last year with the levy rejection. But in the conversation, and again revisiting, and the slide was up, all of the work that the administration has done, that this board has done, in cuts on the backs of our staff and the redistricting on the back of our elementary school families, and to hear about how, I'm going to use the word successful, in bringing more or reduced costs to the community. It started to become apparent that that's almost a little bit of a give back then from all that work that was done, that started to move me off of in these discussions off of the $14 million more to the $11 million. One of the discussion points that we did have that I don't know how much it came out here, and it's a tough one to gauge, is what is that right days cash outstanding number? I love 84. I really love 120. Can we live with 44? I mean, we were at one point, predicting 52 days in the forecast. So 52 days, the sky isn't falling immediately. It is manageable. It is livable. As Mr. Dreyer said, it doesn't provide a lot of room for error. Something can really disrupt you. But if 44 days is something that is manageable and a reduced ask from 2024 fits the bill of what is my favorite levy, it's the one that passes. That seems like something to continue to discuss. So again, that's not what you asked me. I kind of jumped out on the conversation. I apologize. The focus in the Finance Committee, from what I was keyed in on anyway, was what is the days cash outstanding benchmark that we're comfortable with. Certainly a reiteration. We also talked about, we don't have to do anything, guys. We could sit on our hands and kick the can. Doing nothing is an option. It's a really, really bad option. You hear how that $11 million becomes $15 million. If we wait another year, we're back on we know we're certainly going to be back on the ballot very soon. So that's not an option. I think there's a theoretical discussion or a values discussion. These programs that we have cut, we've said several times they're not coming back, and they're not coming back, but we could make the argument on the other end of the spectrum, it's not even 14 million isn't the max, it's something more to bring all these programs back. But the community's got a lot of challenges ahead of itself economically too. Depending on what costs are gonna do by November and what the economic circumstances are in the community in November. So again, I'm rambling now. I'll shut up. You're giving me the hook. So that was, not very brief what other items we discussed in finance.
Here's the board in board docs and the finance committee notes, the presentation that we discussed at finance is there. So you don't have all the context of the conversation, but some of these examples that Mr. Bennington's talking about, we have them illustrated in terms of true cash days. For example, the 0.5% income tax leaves us at 4 true cash days in fiscal year 29. That's obviously, you can't end there, right? That's essentially 0. So you'd have to do, but the point is there's some other illustrations that may, if you look at them and you have questions, please, free to ask. We're trying to keep this conversation focused for you, but we do have the same illustrations on the things that we've discussed.
Ms. Menke, did you want to add anything to that?
I think the final thing to say on this and to keep in context is this will remain a wait-and-see game as we buckle down a little bit more in time with the budget. But unfortunately, this is a cyclical, every 2 years issue for boards, and it's just, like I said, it's a wait-and-see game. It'll be interesting to see if they step up with Senate Bill 66. Unfortunately, we won't know until June 30th at 11:59 and 59 seconds. And that has happened before. So I think it's prudent to say we probably really can't make up our mind until July 1st.
Is the income tax restricted to 3 years? Or is that just a modeling decision?
You can do an income tax 1 to 10 years or continuing. So I modeled 5 years, I just did everything 5 years with the idea to get through this forecast period. But the income tax, Mr. Anderson, the key with it is, while it fully collects $10.5 million in today's dollars, it doesn't get there right away, right? If you pass a property tax levy in November, we get all of that next year. Now, it's split between 2 school years, but we get it all in the next calendar year, where an income tax takes longer to collect and pay back.
Which is what's driving the 3-year thought, is that something would have to happen then in 3 years to make up for that
So
loss in funding.
it's not the income tax falling off, it's the cash driving it.
It's
Gotcha.
the timing of the collection of the cash.
Perfect.
Yes.
So how did you've got 84 days true cash for the 14 million, the 44 for the 11. How does that amount of cash work with that silly capping thing that they're talking about?
We're well below that.
Okay.
Now, I will make one prediction about the budget. There will be a cap. I don't think it'll be 30%. I think it'll be higher than that. In the case of, if you look at this forecast, this is our best case, right? This is if you did $14 million at our current situation, we hit 131 true cash days, 30% cap would hit that year. Okay, so of all our scenarios, that's the only time it would come into play. So we're really below that cap, the 30% all the time. So it's, again, but there's anyway, there's some ways around it that the legislators themselves have kind of hinted that we could do to get around it. But
Why do it at all?
But why do it at all? Exactly. But I don't think a 30% cap.
It's a good question, but worrying about the 30% cap would be a good problem for us. So to
Yeah,
speak.
and I haven't been. That's one thing we've talked about on our cash management policy is we don't have an upper limit, and the reason we really don't is because we don't ever expect to be there, right? We're at 173 days today, but that's 1 month. That's a point in time in the year. That's not our norm, right? So that's why we're more concerned about the low end, and our cash management policy says if we're looking at the forecast and we see 62 days less coming up, the board should expect a recommendation from Mr. Hostler and I on what we do about it. right? Levy doesn't pass, here are the reductions we make to make sure we stay at 60 days. So even at that 44 days, we should have a plan in place if we don't pass a new levy, or we'd have reductions in place or planned on.
Yeah, that 180 days today has to carry us through the next 3, 4, 5 months when we're not going to collect another dollar of revenue.
You know, very little, right? Yes.
Very little.
Yeah, you know, look at, and I hate to, our friends, well, they're on the side of the river too, but Anthony Wayne, she's borrowing to make payroll this summer.
Whoa.
Yeah. She ends the year at 4 true cash days, or and if you got a $2 million payroll like we do per payroll, it's significant.
So if we do the 11 million, just throwing this out there, if we do the 11 million, then we know we've got trouble come 2028. So we're kind of telling a future board, either be prepared to make cuts in what, 26 or 27? 27?
Well, with the 11 million, you're good through fiscal year 29. It's fiscal year 30 that you're going to be concerned about. And to Ms. Minke's point, we don't know what that next biennium is going to look like. I think what I have here with Senate Bill 66, if I was going to bet on a scenario, this is probably not unreasonable, but we don't know. Right, so Sue, to your point is, that 44 true cash days, do I think it's low? And yeah, but that's 4 years out, and the question is, as a board, you know, that next board's gonna have to deal with that, and we're gonna have to keep looking ahead, but we would have to have a plan in place for new money going on the ballot, you know, that, or reductions out there. But at least between now and then, we're stable and you have some time to plan and adjust.
Well, and it sends a signal that there is some measure, there's a great measure of fiscal responsibility over the next 5 years as well.
We're not flush with cash.
Yeah, and it's 2 biennium budgets in the next 5 years too. I mean, we're sweating the next one. It's the next one after that could be really tricky. So I mean, that's the uncertainty with the state and Governor Tressel.
That's why I'm just kind of, in theory, I'm just intrigued, supportive of this idea of not going after what we lost in 2024, you know, reducing that amount, reducing that ask. There's a lot of appeal to that from a risk reward standpoint. It doesn't help the true days cash, but it doesn't help in some other areas. Still back on the ballot in 2030. Not making any more cuts, but putting in financial responsibility. It just kind of seems to thread the needle of some things that'll be helpful in the ballot box.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, right, when you look at the expense growth in those out years in the forecast, it's pretty healthy. So I would imagine between now and 27, 28, 29, we can work to tamp that down a bit, right? 5.7, 7.2, 5.7% every year is a pretty healthy number.
Well, and that's going to happen while it's just sitting here, right? It's because we are, you know, of our budget, what it is, it's personnel, and then, you know, we'll have some time in their new contract negotiations, and, you know, you'll have OPC and the teachers, but it's really the teachers that drive that, and then and the struggle is going to be going back to what Mr. Hassler was showing in terms of recruiting. You know, our teachers are at 2.5%, where everyone around here is over 3%, and I'm not saying. That's not, you know, I got 2.5 built in, so that's, if you have any room, that's where it is, right? But you're gonna have to negotiate that. We're gonna have to negotiate that when the time comes. And purchase services is just the next, well, take it back up. Benefits are tied to salaries. And of course, controlling healthcare costs is the biggest one there. And then in purchase services, the driver is special education costs. So we know what the drivers are, and in some cases we don't have, I won't say we don't have control. we make efforts to control, but it's not, turn the spigot on and off is not, it's not like turning the light switch on and off. Special ed's gonna provide every child, a free and appropriate education in least restricted environment per the law. And we do a great job, I think, with Dr. Glesser and her staff to make sure we're doing the right thing and not just throwing resources at the kids. But we don't always have control over who's coming here. In fact, we don't have any control over it.
Yeah, and I think that, figuring out the right amount that puts us at the right cash days that's appropriate for this community is certainly our first question. And as we, engage the community, as we discuss as a board, the second question is going to be to the community. Again, this is, off the 5-year forecast, this is based on what the world looks like now. If this community wants this world of our district to look different, either by adding programs that don't exist yet, programs that were reduced, or if they say it's, that was a nice low amount, looking into the future, if you need more money, you need to cut more, then that's the conversation that I'd like to have with the community. So for my priorities, it's what do we need to do to maintain where we are now without having to do more reductions immediately, and then to talk with the community about, as we continue to find ways to engage directly with the community, to say, what is it that, we've heard that some people wanted gifted back in the budget. Well, let's talk about, as we live into not having a gifted program, what does that look like and what is missed? Is that something our community is willing to support in the future? And the same way, are there programs that don't exist? We hear more and more about workforce readiness. What does it look like? Fabulous program that we have right now that won an award. What are other ways that we could be better preparing? Those programs may cost, they're going to cost more resources for us and people to help lead the students in those. So I think that's the kind of the two-part conversation I have in my head is, what do we need right now for the way the world looks like right now? And I realize the state's going to change that view over the next month, but as of July 1st, what does the world look like? And then going forward, if this is the way the world looks, do we want the world to change? And that ways that cost us more or cost us less. For now, I'd like to figure out the best way to provide the revenue needed for where we are right now.
So
I do want to say, I think the other thing, I do want to say very clearly, I'm not interested in any way of delaying this and making it more expensive for the community in the future, or giving us that, not only the uncertainty that comes around hiring, but the risk that puts us in the future with any other changes to revenue or expectations for the community. So I believe that we need to have something on the ballot in November to be really clear about where we're heading. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I agree with you. You have to have something in November, but am I missing something here? Is this very myopic? I mean, it doesn't, in thinking about the report from Ken, is it pronounced Liner? Is that how he pronounces it? Phonetically, that's how it's pronounced. So that's how I'll pronounce it.
Liner, but yeah.
What does this do with the demands from those community forums that they don't want trailers? They want us to address the growth, which we had done in the levies that we put out there before that were wholeheartedly rejected. This is keeping us at a, well, shall I continue the analogy? To me, that seems like it's keeping us at a tourniquet modem. You can't survive with a tourniquet wrapped around an artery bleed. So what do we do? Are we missing that planning for the future that we've been criticized that we don't do, but we did, but it was rejected, and this doesn't So, yikes, how do we address the obvious needs of an exploding high school and future trailers that are coming to us that those two community forums said we don't want? That's not addressing any of that, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I've thought about this a lot. If there was an appetite, let's say the community came and said, hey, we want you to address, let's reopen the building project, whatever shape that is. Under this scenario, you would have to think about doing a bond and an operating levy together to accomplish it.
Kind of like what TPS just did.
Right. So there's no, in the old, with the growth that we had built into the incremental levy, that was built in. If you did a new building and did what we had planned, that was built, the growth was built into that forecast. We've taken growth completely out of, I'll say not completely, almost completely out of the forecast. In, not next year, but the following years, as if you remember from the May 7th work session, we have a little bit of money put in there for growth. We're adding things like for compliance, like intervention specialists or speech pathologists. So we do have a little bit of money in the future years built in there, but it's not significant. So the way it's shaped up, if class sizes may grow a little bit, right? It's just there's not a lot of money built in to be able to handle that growth at this point.
Yeah, I think the it's the adage, watch what you do, not what you say. And I think the community has responded, we're not interested in raising taxes. They have responded and said, don't raise taxes. And the 75% margin, I know just a few days ago shows that, that was not a new tax. So whatever they say in the forums are what they say in the forums, but what they say at the ballot box, I think is a pretty clear message.
No, they're not agreeing with one another.
But one dictates what we can do and the other one doesn't.
Well,
That's true.
And I think it's fair to say not everyone in the community agrees. I mean, it's nothing past 100% to zero. So there certainly are people that were willing to, spend more money in order to provide those extra classrooms, not have trailers, but the majority, not everyone said no. So I think that's the conversation again that I think in the future, that I think, both we knew from last year's focus reports as well as the folks who came to the forum and the report that we received from Mr. Kiner, that there are conversations that we need to continue to have, and that's part of the what do we want to add and what do we want to take away. Right now, I'm not prepared to try to put back on anything that raises taxes like that again, just because we haven't heard the support yet.
And you guys heard more than I do, obviously, with the community, but the Monday morning quarterbacking I heard in November, if you just asked, if you just done a renewal, now maybe the people it would have passed at 13, no new taxes at that point. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if I believe it, but that was kind of that theme out there. And now that it's come off, anything we do is new. So,
Renewal again.
Yeah.
The renewal again is $6 million of cuts and 7.5. So I mean that the renewal wouldn't have worked. We would have had to have we would be here today with renewal, but we would be stable because we would have that money coming in predictably. Right now, we don't have that predictability.
Okay.
Yeah, right, yeah. So, Ms. Larimer, I'm kind of willing to trade off some of the concerns that you mentioned there for that certainty that we don't have right now. I don't like it, but I think that's the path of best success.
So based on my really rough count, and someone can correct me after this meeting, but I have that we have 79 days until we have to have language submitted for the ballot if we are to put anything on in November. We have scheduled those, June 5th times in order to hear from, sit with. We can talk about kind of the structure of those. But, we have a couple work sessions, a retreat, and a regular meeting. I would assume by about July 21st, we're going to have to have approved whatever needs to go on. I don't think we want to approve that at our August 6th meeting, the day that it's due. That sounds like a bad idea. But it does mean we'll have to have, I would think, a tentative decision by early July to get that language properly aligned with the auditor. So I'm just going to raise that if we really don't know what the state's going to do until July 1st, we're going to have about a week or two maybe to figure out the final decision.
Well, here, that's all a great point where my head goes with that thought, is we're looking at 44 days cash outstanding without knowing what the state's going to do. If we kind of kept with that theory, once we know what the state's going to do, if we came into the June regular meeting with something, with this analysis that looks like 44, 45 days, whatever makes sense, or that would continue this conversation.
Yeah, and I think, again, Ms. Roland Miller's point, the process, and this is maybe Mr. Anderson for there's two resolutions the board has to pass. The first is a resolution of necessity, so you define how much you're asking for what term. It goes to the county auditor who calculates the millage, and once I have that, then we can actually do the resolution to proceed, which actually has the ballot language. Legally, the auditor needs 2 weeks. Now, practically, we can get it done faster than that. But, and Matt's a good guy, he'll work with us on it, but, he could say, I want 2 weeks to calculate this. So you really are probably, the resolution of necessity should happen probably by, early July, and by the regular meeting in July, doing the resolution to proceed. I don't like driving it that close.
Yep.
But that's,
Yeah.
because the other thing is, it's more technicalities, but the ballot language takes a little bit of work to make sure it's absolutely right, because if there's any technical glitch on it, it can get thrown out and there's no do-overs. And ask Ottawa Hills.
So again,
Who makes the ballot?
The state budget is done it was completed by when?
June 30th.
By June 30th.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in for 1 second. I think it was 2 biennium budgets ago, they extended the deadline.
Awesome.
So that, I think they did it by two weeks. Don't quote me on that, but there's been a time where.
Extended 2 weeks?
So I wouldn't hang it on. And when you do get it at midnight, it takes a while to go through the document to see what the real impact is, because there's no hearings on the items that they're doing. So there has to be an analysis of, well, what is it that they actually
came out.
did? Yeah, so.
To Ms. Larimer's question on the ballot language, what happens is our attorney, our bond counsel will produce the language. The board approves that in the resolution to proceed. It goes to the Board of Elections. They take it, then they take it and put it in ballot language. It comes back to me to approve. And then, and I will tell you, I'm a chicken. I have our attorney look at it. Between the two of us, we make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and then we sign off on it. Then it goes back to the Board of Elections. So we write the ballot language. The Board of Elections writes it, kind of copies it, but who knows, and then we approve it. So the key is it has to be to the Board of Elections by that date. There's some work that goes back and forth after that date, but the key is we have it on their doorstep. I hand deliver it down there and get a receipt, everything to make sure it's right.
So we can continue to talk in theory in June, but setting an amount doesn't happen until July.
Well, we're gonna have some indicators of what's happening, right? We're not gonna know, may not know for the last hour, or it could get extended, but I think we'll have some idea which way the winds are blowing. We'll have some kind of idea. Our professional associations do a good job of getting simulations and stuff for us. I think worst case is by the end of the month, we should be able to have a couple of ideas. bracketed ideas.
By the end of June.
By the end of June, worst case. So it may not be. So we kind of know where we are, and if the attorneys need a few days, cost us a few more dollars for their time, but they could draft a couple of different resolutions of necessity, and then we pull out the one that works. So that shouldn't slow us down too much unless something dramatically happens.
I mean, the adding in the Senate Bill 66 off the top of my head without looking at all your detail, that was a $6 million change in our 5-year cash balance. So that really does $6 million at this point. If it changed another, I hope it's not going to get worse, but we know it could. So it does have an impact on this. I'd like to, unless there's something really burning for anyone, like to move us on the agenda to our next item if we're all ready, and we'll continue to work.
I'll open invitation to any board members. You want to sit down and go through our simulations some more. I will gladly spend hours more than you probably want to spend on it. But if it helps you understand where the numbers are coming from, I'm happy to do that with you.
That's good information for us to continue to review. Thank you, Mr. Drewer and Mr. Hassler, for that. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hassler for the superintendent's report.
Thanks, and I'll go quickly through this. So one, we wanted to begin with a thank you to the community. We had 75% approval. Certainly a show for the voters who showed up. It was a statement of unity, so we're grateful for that. We know that it protects millions of funding, and we just spent an hour talking about the swings, and this gives us that certainty that we've been searching for in the previous hour. So we're really supportive of that. It maintains that infrastructure. You heard the red light, the one red light that we received from the Auditor of States. Financial is our facilities, the age of our facilities. These dollars are really needed to do that. So that shared commitment towards our school district, most importantly to our students, we're just very grateful for that. The volunteers, their voice made a huge difference, and we're going to continue to do what we're doing and work hard with community engagement. And again, it's don't listen to what we say, but watch what we say and what we are doing. Or watch what we're doing, not what we're saying, because we are following up on those important things. So I had a great graduation ceremony yesterday, so everybody was here attending, and the graduating class had over $25 million offered in scholarships, combined total. So that is incredible. That last weeks of school are certainly very memorable. One of the neat things that they've done here is, after the final exams, they gather at Steinecker Stadium for a senior sunset. So that was pretty neat to see that. Many of you had a chance to see the spring musical, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, some outstanding, cast and crew and the music and everything, some wonderful individual performances too, as well. So a great experience to see so many kids engaged in that performance. The walkathon and dodgeball assembly was a huge hit, pun intended, and they loved to see that, and it raised $5,800 towards the Jacket Way program at HPI. Scholarship time, we wanted to recognize that local 242, the OPSI group, did their scholarship award, and Maisie Zapata is very active, and I'm sure you recognize her from all of her twirling, not only on the sidelines at our games, but also in the community and across the state and nation. And she'll be performing at Purdue basketball games. So I guess that is a big thing in Purdue. So we're excited for her. So we also had some a relay, jacket runners for the marathon. So it's great to see our teachers out there running and competing. And we had a number of student groups that were working water stations, so they always get very excited when they see their teachers out there, running. So good to see. This was really interesting at the junior high, talking about that entrepreneurial spirit. And so we had a guest speaker, Luke St. Amand, who talked about his experience on the TV show Shark Tank and what he's done, and carried that message to some of our students. So Walk for Hope, May 3rd was certainly the student art show. So, this was something that was very successful. High School Indian Heritage Club, their celebration, certainly a great time for a number of students to come out. French Club, authentic cooking, French bakery, high calories, which is always a good thing. And we've been running a theme of Jacket Moments That Matter, where people have been taking time to post different things that are happening. And I won't go through all of them, but if you haven't had a chance to read those, they're really inspiring, because it really gets back to the core of what we do. And that relationship between our students and our staff and especially our teachers is really special and remarkable. So that is really what sets Perrysburg apart, and we'll continue to do so in the future. And then just our annual or our monthly update, I'll flip to that. This is the Student Safety and Staff Accountability Update. So we have a couple things here. Again, we're doing this because of this commitment to transparency and action. And when we talk about the levy and we talk about the things in the last hour and a half, you've heard those words during our conversations. We began with transparency. This is what it will cost you. This is a new levy, and the action, inviting people in to talk about. So this is something that is a theme to all that we do. So we've had since the last board meeting, we had our monthly meeting with those that are responsible for monitoring the tip line, and those individuals are listed there. Since the last meeting, since the last board meeting, we had that monthly check-in. Also, we did meet with the police chief and the building SROs as a semester meeting to review all the tips that we'd received and discuss them and talk to them about what we're experiencing, how it's working, and receive their feedback as well as law enforcement. So that's something that continues. We've begun to keep track of all these reports so community members can go back and monitor and hold us accountable to what we're saying. Are we doing what we're saying that we were going to do? So this is something that's important. This presentation will be added to that link after today, where people can go and see the presentation and hear the comments. We do have the video that's been shown to our students, the Student Bill of Rights. And we have the tip line, and that's something that is very important to us that we've implemented. And so since the last board meeting, we've received 3 additional reports. They're all from the same complainant. One of them was archived concern from 2019 about a student incident that was addressed at the time through building level administration to the satisfaction of the complainant. No new information was provided, but was not happy with that resolution today. Hiring concern from 2013. This was a decision that was made over a decade ago, included information in the complaint about the employee's spouse that was not known or necessarily relevant because at the time of employment, because there are laws that prohibit us from even asking if a applicant is married. So it is something that isn't part of what we can ask folks. And then the third complaint that we received on that day from the same person was a disagreement over support services decision. So that had been handled appropriately, just disagreed with the outcome of that decision. Regarding Mr. Henline, since since February 19th, there have been no additional complaints lodged. One of the things that we did get into when we met with the chief and the police was looking at providing some more clarification to what the tip line is for. And the three examples that we kind of highlighted today sort of fall into this. The intent of what we did setting this up was to talk about specific complaints against staff or following up on a complaint someone had about staff to see where that was or what was done with it or if anything was done with it. As mentioned today, we're talking about decisions that were made a decade ago over a hiring decision really begin to fall outside what this tip line was created to do. We did receive a public records request asking for information from the tip line, so we're working with our attorney on that. That is a concern to us because we've really worked hard to create a space where people can report things, have a certain level of accountability. How somebody who is asking for that information that can share that wherever, that is causing us to have some conversations with our attorneys about what we can and can't share under the law. So we'll have an update on that. But at any rate, we continue to look over the things. We had our meeting with the police and just a reminder of where folks can go. So that is a quick update on that.
I think I would just add to reinforce maybe what you just raised, especially with the public records requests. I think some people are using this line to share concerns about student-to-student concerns, which really should be that chain of command, who you bring those to the attention of, versus reporting them through this line, since it is the issue of public records right now. So I do think we have concerns about, what is being reported, whether it's appropriate to be reported is one thing, certainly, but if it really was set up about staff issues more than student to student. So I think that's a concern that we have, that we're trying to figure out kind of what to do next with that.
Yeah, I think it's important from a public record standpoint. Request for information about staff is completely different than anything to do with the students, right? And occasionally you get, if my child, was bullying Eric's child and got disciplined, Eric has no legal right to know what the discipline was, right? And people think they have a right to know if these things, and it shows up public records request, and they don't. And I think that's sometimes struggle. I want to know how that kid got punished or whatever, and it's not gonna happen through a public records request. And it's not gonna happen from the staff either, because it's a FERPA violation.
Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to community engagement. We have minutes from our last meeting, and you also have in 9.2, each of you had already received it, but the report is there as part of the agenda now. We have certainly, within the Community Engagement Committee, been looking at the recommendations and next steps that were provided in that report. We're also kind of combining them with the outcomes from the focus group reports from February of '24. They're very similar, a lot of overlap. So we're kind of working through those right now. We did have our first meeting of one of the next steps that we identified, and if Ms. Menke and I have been working on, is a communications task force. We had our first meeting on Thursday. That was 10 community members out of ended up being 17 applications, covering a wide range of different marketing and communication experience professional jobs. So it's a great group. We had a good first meeting, and we have 3 more meetings through this month and through June, kind of looking at how to focus on external audiences, especially the non-parents. What are our key messages for them? We'll be looking at, probably at our next meeting more so, how financial needs are communicated to that group. And then going forward, the general messaging that shows the value of the educational experience for the students and for the community as a whole. So that is underway. Not sure what, Ms. Menke, if you want to add in?
I don't know, do you want me to add any more on the
Go for
task
it.
force
Yep.
in terms of the conversations? It was interesting hearing from some of the members of the task force just because of the varying professional levels there and the fields of communication, especially with the marketing people, branding, consistency of branding, and really stressing action over just a static display type of thing. And I think there, towards the end, I mean, it was nice because we began with just general conversation, but I believe we did a good job on getting back down to business for the next 3 meetings and really deciding that what we need to focus on are not really the parents, but everybody else in the community. I think the next meeting will definitely look at more of statistics with voters, short-range goals, long-range goals, and like I said, consistency, strategy, and the hierarchy.
I think out of the report conversation and out of our committee discussion, one of the ideas that came out as a recommendation that we wanted to bring forward, and I emailed to reference this, but the idea, and this has come out, it's actually interesting to me, all the independent voices that I've actually heard this from, as well as in the report, that people want a high level kind of, here's the 3 things we talked about at the meeting, here's some of the outcomes that may be of interest to you, and that we as the board would communicate that out to the community after each of our meetings. If that's something that we would be willing to do, our recommendation is that we each kind of take a turn after meetings. I could create a schedule and get that out to everyone, but we certainly could work with the staff, and we wouldn't have to come up with everything, but that each of us would take a turn in sending out an email to that stakeholders in the community about what's going on at the meetings. I think, the video, it sounds like what I heard back from not just, at our meeting Thursday night, but from others in the community, we know that not everybody's watching that video. We know that the benchmarked emails, if you want to hear something about this, go to this point in the video, that's been helpful. I think this would just be another step to say here, since no one, heard what we discussed tonight, unless you watch the video, here are some of the things we discussed that are upcoming. So if that's something that we can agree to, and I'll leave that for a second, just the open forums on June 5th, we really do want to create kind of this open space for people to just come and be in dialogue around the levy, and I think that to me is just another way to try to engage with the community. We want to continue to find ways after that June 5th date to continue to do that. I think out of the report, the one thing that I'm still not quite sure what to do with is the expectation that seems to be in the community, at least with some people, that we as a board would be influencing the township and the city and how they develop. And I laugh because we're 5 people that really have no power to the city other than the fact that we get to elect, or if we're in the township, elect the trustees or the council members. So that is one that I'm not sure how we can kind of educate the community more about, but there's all these kind of recommendations of we need to create a committee to have, to change how development's happening in this community, and I I just don't see how that actually is realistic. So I think some of that's more, how are we communicating with the district residents about the kind of realities, and who has the power there is the community does, not this board.
Well, and as I stated at the meeting too, the reality that economic development within Perrysburg was already set in place really a couple decades ago. It's done and over with. There's minor things that we can push to tweak, but it's not going to get the monetary result that we want.
Do we still have a district dialogue this Thursday?
Is it this Thursday? Yes.
Okay.
I haven't looked that far on my calendar yet.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the two of us are
Okay.
scheduled to be there.
Yeah. I've got
And I believe we have an end of the year kind of wrap up to the senior class and focusing on, you know, the high school and our graduates, where they're going, what they're doing, how that works to support our seniors. So I think that's what we're focusing on for part of it. And then it's open for anyone who wants to come in, drop in and talk. So they don't have to be there for that portion of it, but that's one of the theme events.
Okay.
Is that, is the idea of we as board members sending out communications after the board member meetings, kind of summarizing our meetings? Is that something
I don't know. I'm honestly not that excited about it. I don't know how I would do that. I mean, I sit here and I make my notes. I'm paying attention. I'm living in the moment. To sit here and take notes for somebody else, I know that would be really hard for me to do. And I don't think I would do it very well. I really don't. I'm just being really honest. Years and years and years of college, it's one thing to sit there and pay attention to something. You're somewhat disengaged because you're busy taking notes. That's not how I want to come into a board meeting, as being more engaged in taking notes than being engaged in the meeting. I don't know if we have somebody do that with us, for us. If there's a student that would want to do it, that would be kind of interesting. I don't know. I mean, I get the point, but we've got a really good agenda. It just doesn't say, it says what we're going to talk about. It doesn't say what was said. I suppose I can see the point of it. I just think I would really stink at doing it. I really do.
And I think the intent is that it's not, that it's very consumable. So I'm literally thinking 3 bullet points. Here's 3 main takeaways from the meeting. Mm-hmm. And for this meeting, which I was going to assign myself if we want to do this, so everybody else is off the hook except me, who would need to figure out. But I mean, the fact that we're talking about the 5-year forecast, what the, you know, kind of what that is, how the state may affect that. 2 is we're looking at needing funding that would go on the ballot, whether it's an income tax or in the form of a levy, and the different scenarios on that. And the 3rd one, the meeting's not over yet, so I don't know what that one's gonna be yet. But I really don't think, if I say this needs to be a 3-sentence email, it really doesn't need to be much more than that, because that's the consumable amount that I think people are looking for.
So they really want the agenda just brought down into 3 statements? I mean, to me, they could have just looked at the agenda and gotten a lot more information out of it.
But they don't know. I think it's what's important. I mean, not that not all of our business is important, but what is going to impact them directly as a community member is much different than, you know, what's going to affect staff versus what's going to affect students. This would be focused on looking at what's going to impact the community.
Yeah, think of it almost like a movie trailer. Like,
There you
it's a
go. Now you're
2-hour
talking my
movie and
language.
it's a, minute and 30-second
With
clip.
good music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's finding a balance between listening to a 3-hour, 3.5-hour YouTube video and getting the key points that might not be pulled out from the agenda. Because just reading through the agenda, unless you go through all the PowerPoints, it may not come out that we had a discussion about potential levy strategy for November. Right, you got to get into the PowerPoints to figure that out. Or listen to the whole video, which, by the way, listen to the whole video. They're exciting.
Rachel Zicker has certainly offered to help us with this, so we would not be flying solo.
Okay.
I'm not going to go first. I don't know that I'll go second,
I'll
but
go first.
you can put me in the rotation. December sounds like a good month for me.
I will volunteer to go second.
Okay.
I mean, I
This is
think-
getting more intriguing for me now, so okay.
I think keeping with the hot topic for the community, the name of the game is short and sweet, and to quickly explain the why, maybe an educational tidbit on this is why we do that. But yes, short and sweet.
Yeah, I mean, they can still look at the agenda, they can still watch the three-hour video, maybe less. But this would, even if they don't have time to do that, this gives them that information. So we can try it. I'll put Sue last, and we can kick her out of the rotation if she doesn't like it.
I can use y'all as my tutor.
We actually have, right now, scheduled 15 meetings between, so that's also very equal. We have 15 meetings, I think,
You
between
want it
now and
for
the end of the year.
Each, not just the work
Correct.
session too?
They would be shorter, because usually we have just one, maybe two topics. And I'll take any special meetings. If I call them, I guess maybe I should have to write the summary for them. I think it's worth trying. If it's not received well, or we don't like doing it, then we can stop doing it. Other comments about community engagement? I know that, looking at the final report, we'll continue to work through that and glean things off that for months to come. So that certainly is always an active report that we can reflect on. Move us into 10 for board committee reports or other topics for discussion. We've talked about community engagement and finance, student achievement.
Student achievement met on May 6th. The minutes are up on the screen. They're really well-written minutes. Give you some highlights. Talked about student fees for both the junior high, high school, as well as the elementary and HPI. So we will be, for 17-1, approving those student fees. Again, the goal of the student fees is to recoup costs on consumable items, and a lot of work went into kind of determining what the necessary increases, where the increases need to go if they need to happen. So the Grading Policies Committee met, had their last meeting for the year. Planning on doing another meeting in June once the new administrative team is in place for some good transitions, given the divergence of kind of opinions on how that, on where that should land. I think Ms. Schwartzmiller said it well, there's a nuance of the conversations that'll require support of the building leadership. So as that building leadership gets put in place, more work to come there. So the high school ELA review process continues. They continue to learn from their first meetings and build upon them, as they are, the goal of that process is, to really be able to define, as books are being chosen, the whys and the whats for the reading that are being selected, so that parents and students can understand the whys behind that. What else do I want to pull out of here? On the elementary side, again, in the kind of the continued, transparency, and the district is listening to parents. Talked about the new elementary progress reports and got some really good feedback from the parents, and made adjustments to those progress reports based off of that feedback. And it seems like we've got a really good tool in the future to be able to report elementary students' progress in that area. Some really great new summer reading academy. Hired a director. K-1 invites, K through 1 invites have been sent out to about 70 students, hoping to get around, and by now they may already know, hoping to get around 30 for that. And I think those are the high points. In the interest of time, we'll leave it at that. But good meeting and student achievement, that committee, or that team continues to do a lot of work.
I think the only thing I would add that was raised as a concern, there's so much great coordination work that's being done by teaching and learning, whether it's the grading practices or the ELA review, all of the above, that they talked about you can see in 2D, the thoughts from the Jacket Way meetings, that there is a concern that's being shared in that meeting that aggressive behavior is increasing, especially in the younger grades with kind of physical aggressive behavior. Older seems to be an increase in kind of verbal disrespect and inappropriate language, but that's becoming a challenge more for the teachers of how to address it appropriately. So I think that that's just something we want to, as a community, kind of lift up and say, how can we continue to support parents and students, but especially the teachers as they're seeing an increase. I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but that there's an increase in this more aggressive behavior in students. And so Jacket Way is more important than ever as we look at that. I think that was the only other thing that really struck me from the meeting to share out. Other committees that may have met, I think you said that operations.
Well, yeah, but I was going to continue your theme here, because I was at the Student Achievement Liaison Team Meeting. It's called SALT. And that's a statewide committee meeting. One of the things that we talked about, and we met the night before the Board Leadership Institute, there's another big push going on right now through state leaders to have some sort of student function on the board seat, and the steps that are done to create that student on the board seat. So there was actually a state representative, Angela Adams, who was talking about this with us, and I thought it was pretty interesting. She said a comment that I wrote down that I thought was so important, and it just really drove me the entire rest of the weekend while I was down there. You're missing a large piece when someone you're talking about isn't present. And I thought, oh my gosh, to me that was profound. That was one of those sentences that really sticks with you, because we are talking about students all the time. There's not a single student in the room. Now, there were for a few minutes, but we don't have a student rep on the board. And when this came up, I brought this up when it was brought to my attention at one of our Capitol conferences. Golly, Tom, when was that? I just remember the shape of the room, because we were more leaning up against that way, and I was sitting on this edge, so we were still faced that way in the room. And I brought it up, and it kind of didn't go anywhere. There were several breakout sessions at BLI that weekend that were on student reps, parent reps on the board. I know TPS has one of each. And just, I haven't had the time to be able to type up all my notes because they're rather lengthy for you guys yet, but I just thought, when we're talking about community engagement, community reach out, we're talking all adults. We're missing our kiddos. And as clearly evident by just the few who are here tonight, we've got some extraordinary young people that we don't have here. Now, can they vote? Of course not. They're not elected. But they can certainly, it was the superintendent from Delaware, who, I think her first name was Heidi, and she and her student named Greta just did a marvelous presentation. And
I think this is for the July retreat, when we talk about governance issues, I think this is something we could add to
Okay.
the agenda for that to
yeah,
discuss.
I think it's, would be something that we should definitely consider and talk about.
I'll add that to the agenda for that.
Thinking ahead.
Okay. Any other committee reports?
Would you like some comments on operations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Denise, who is our food services manager, she is looking at PD for it's a state manager certification and ServSafe thing, person in charge training that helps when certain people are out. And person in charge training is actually more important than safe serve, which I find very interesting. We're still looking at hiring some custodians, hiring 2. Have we actually done that yet? And we only had 2 applications. So I don't know.
No, looking for subs.
Yes,
We don't have any.
yes.
Well, we do, but these about 100.
We sent an employee to HVAC classes, and that is going to save us about $45,000. Well, that saved us $45,000 on the first job he did. So hopefully that pays off even more as time goes on. The class itself was about $6,000, and of that, $3,200 was just the software alone. So, but it's what is needed now in running our controls in all of our buildings. So, the biggest one, and I'm sure you've seen plenty on it, the good old TikTok challenge with putting things in the drive port. I think we're up to 31 computers that are damaged.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of
Stop
them,
doing that.
and this is why it's so dangerous. It's really a ticking time bomb because computers have lithium batteries nowadays. And the short might not occur until later on when they're at home or in somebody's car. And voila, there's a fire. And who knows what gets taken out. So I think that was pretty much it. A little bit on facilities, but I think the biggest thing too that we were talking about was the number of public records requests kind of has people bogged down.
And I think we talked about, Brett and I got some software to help us reduce the amount of time him and I spend on particularly when there's email requests and stuff like that. He had room in his budget this year to buy a year to see if it makes sense. It makes sense at the level of public records requests we have. If it goes away, then not. But I handled public records requests, I can't remember how many pages it was, a couple hundred pages, and it turned out to be 15 relevant pages. And then to redact all the students' names out of them, this software allows me to automate a lot of that work. So we'll see. But email requests and stuff like that Brent can spend hours and hours. And then that's just pulling it. That's not even the redaction side of it. So
I had a question for you about that, Randy. So today I was at the legislative liaison meeting, and let's see, which one is it? HB 127 is awaiting a floor vote, and that has 2 major parts in it. One is allowing our school directory to not be released if there's a records request. And it would be based on policy, and I was thinking, okay, now I'm confused. Do we have a policy already that
yes, we
says
do.
it cannot be released?
No, we have a policy that allows certain directory information to be released. In fact, every year we get public records requests from parochial schools for our student roster so they can recruit them.
Oh, okay, so.
It can't be used for, our policy does not allow it to be used for commercial use, but we do have a policy that allows certain directory information to be released, and Ms. Zicker does a good job of keeping on top of that. So right now, it would be, I would love it if we could have a board policy that would allow us to say no.
Well, that's what this is apparently trying to do.
The
is to give
policy,
us the power to say no.
as if I recall, I'm trying to remember from memory, but for example, the armed forces recruiting, that directory has to be, information has to be made available to them, and so there's other things like that that you can't, right now, you can't opt out of all of it.
Well, I could see that for those who are 18 or turning 18 or something like that, maybe, but
And you can set the parameters of what you consider to be directory information too.
Yes.
So it could be your address, it could be your home, it could be your parents' name, email. I mean, so you can scale that back to a certain point.
To some, yeah, but we still do provide, when we get the public records request, we do, Penta, for example, will do a public records request for students, and that's a little bit different situation, but still.
yeah. Well, it's also going to allow districts to, or at least there's talk of it, about charging for large public records requests. Of course, my first question, well, define large. I mean, that's pretty subjective. But there, Jan Busdechter from Woodmore said that they spent over $26,000 in record requests just for last year. For a district like that,
Feels like
that's
chump change.
phenomenal. I mean, that they've had a lot of issues, so that's really something that was important to them.
And the law allows us to charge actual costs, but not personnel costs. So my time, Mr. Schaefer's time, Hannah or Tom or Don Christie redacting stuff, we can't do that, but we don't make copies anymore. I've done it once, and I charged them for the copies. I've had one time where I've had a couple of times I've had large requests where I gave them a flash drive and I charged them for the flash drive, $7 or whatever it is. But right now what we do is for those large, I have a Dropbox subscription that I can put it in there and say, Ms. Larimer, here's your public records. It's available for 2 weeks. And then the expiration date, they can't access it anymore. So it allows me to control it. But there is some cost in that, but we don't make copies like we used to.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's our time doing public records requests and not doing value added stuff. And then there is, like with the tip line and other things, we sometimes have attorney's fees because we want to make sure we get it right. And we've had a number of those kinds of things.
Well, it certainly sounds like one to keep a watch on. That.
And we've had as many public records requests up to this point as we did all of last year. So.
Wow.
All right, any other discussion, board open discussion before we move to the consent agenda? Okay, 11.1 consent agenda items 12 through 17. We have several retirements that I'll look to Mr. Hostler to name or recognize unless you want me to.
Sure. So a couple things. So I'd like to, in the back of the room, we have Dr. Justin Foltz, who will is being recommended as high school principal for next year. So appreciate Justin being here. And also Brandon Decker is being recommended for HPI principal. So wanted to recognize them for stepping up, and we're really excited about all that they're doing right now in their current roles, but also looking forward to taking on this new role. But we celebrate folks that are certainly coming, but also this time of year, we want to pause for folks who are going, and we've been doing that at each board meeting. But Mr. Best, who is retiring, which Brandon will be falling into Scott's position. We wish him all the best in his almost 18 years of service here with Perrysburg Schools. So we got hired at the same board meeting. So, yeah. So at that meeting, there were 3 principals, and the superintendent hired that. So that was an interesting time to come on board. So, and then Jessica Molina, principal at Toth, is resigning to pursue some other opportunities, and we certainly wish her well and have really appreciated her, all that she's done here. She came as an assistant working in student services, and then moved into Toth and has done a remarkable job. And her background at TPS with leading the Escuela School, which is a bilingual school, really, she really learned a great deal and brought a lot of that to Perrysburg, so we're grateful. So we have, Scott Best, who literally built from the ground up HPI.
They did.
And that vision, and so those two. But Valerie McConkey, she's a speech therapist, a very familiar name, and does tremendous work. And Tracy Limes, a physical education teacher at Frank, who's been here a number of years. Mike Andrews, HPI math teacher, is somebody that I know has been a big part of that staff. And Laura Frank, who's the librarian at Perrysburg Junior High School. And then, of course, Scott Schleter, who is the band director at Perrysburg. So many of these folks were planning on being here another year, but when that changed and we talked about that, some of them took advantage of that opportunity. So we want to just say thank you, and I know there are others who are resigning, and we wish them well too. Different staff members who are leaving, and we're also recalling folks from the recall list, which is exciting. So I think by the next board meeting, we may have recalled every elementary teacher who had been laid off. So that doesn't mean those positions came back, so I want to be clear on that. But what it means is through all of these retirements and changes, we've been able to find a spot for somebody. So Mike Andrews teaches at HPI, but an elementary teacher is moving up into that position, which creates a vacancy, which allows us to call somebody back. So that's how that works. So, but at any rate, so it's an exciting time, lots of activity. Don is certainly earning his keep during this period. So
Just thinking, that's mind-blowing.
but many others, and you can look through the list here of teachers who've been with us and are moving on for different reasons, and we certainly appreciate and value what they do, and also some OPSI folks as well. So
So we look at the consent agenda, if there's any that someone wants to pull to discuss, but otherwise we would move to a motion.
I have a question on, sorry, I want to make sure I have this right. On 13.3, and hopefully, Randy, this is for the purpose of maybe heading off some of your public records request. On the administrative personnel. What's the percentage for that
What do you mean?
in terms of what's the percentage increase?
0.
0%? Okay.
this is their
Hopefully-
employment contracts are up. So this is just approving their employment contract for the next 2 years.
We separate
Yeah.
the administrators' pay and the exempt salaries from their contracts. The board approves typically annually the handbooks for exempt and administrators, which we have the salary schedules in there at that time. And this year, with the reductions, both of those are frozen. So exempt and administrators are frozen, 0.
Okay, any other clarifications? Okay. Like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
Larimer? Ms. Menke, second. Mr. Drew, a roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Minke,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. We move then to 18, other item for consideration, non-consent agenda. Reduction in force resolution for non-teaching employee contracts.
This is a required item that we need to move forward with the reduction plan. While we celebrate the coming and goings, this is something that we certainly don't celebrate, but is a necessary step for us to make sure we have the funds available to operate the way that we promised the community to. So.
And I'd like to point out, the resolution is developed through our attorney to be consistent with the OPSI contract. And you have the resolution in the documentation, the agenda. There is an Exhibit A that's an attachment to board docs that actually has the names. So you have that, that's required by contract, but we just didn't put it out there publicly. So in the OPSI final, there, in that attachment, it has this resolution plus an exhibit with the names.
I move the resolution as presented.
Mr. Bennington, can I have a second?
Seconded.
Mr. Anderson? Any other discussion, questions? Mr. Drew, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Minke.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. And we move into 19, which feels a little redundant right now, but anyone think of anything they wanted to talk about in the last 5 minutes? If not, there were no one signed up for public comment. And so if there are no objections, I will adjourn the meeting.
None here.
Hearing no objections, meeting adjourned.